I actually wanted to start this off by asking whether you think colored vinyl sucks, or whether it's actually a good thing.
I don't necessarily seek it out, but I'm not one of those anti-colored vinyl people. I do know some collectors dead set against it, say it sounds like crap, it sounds horrible. The only instance I will say that I will buy it, but I won't be happy about it if it's the only way that you can get it. Do you have any glow in the dark vinyl?
No, at least I don't think so.
I have several, and they sound like garbage. Every one of them sounds horrible. I don't know what it is about it, but to me, I can take a black version, a standard black version of an album, and then take a colored version, and I don't hear a difference. So, but I don't necessarily seek it out. It's just so prevalent anymore, or prevalent that, like you almost, especially if you shop like at a local record store, chances are you're going to get a colored because they do special indie versions of the record. You might get a choice to get a black, but anymore, you're probably going to get a colored. So I don't really seek it unless it's something like, like that Spirit box I showed earlier.
They look stunning. I love the look of colored records. I think they look great. That said, and we're about ready to get into our best looking records. That's why we're bringing this up. But that said, I think that a lot of the crackles and pops and the colored vinyl I hear is because it's colored vinyl. I don't think it's that colored vinyl is inherently more noisy, but I think there is a wider variance in materials used to make colored vinyl that seems to give you a better chance to get not the greatest mix, whereas I think whatever compound is used for black vinyl, and I recognize there are probably half a dozen compounds actually used, but whatever that compound is for traditional black vinyl, I think stays relatively similar, whereas there's enough variance in the color that occasionally it comes through on an album that frankly kind of sounds like junk. And that bothers me a lot. So
I have the opposite of that. I guess I've got lucky and I've gotten good pressings of everything. I like, other than the glow in the dark, I haven't had any color that I can just say this sounds horrible. Thankfully. So, but I've watched other YouTube videos and other people talking about it. So apparently maybe it's just my ears and I don't perceive that.
And I agree in general too. Some of my best sounding records that we heard and the best sounding records were also colored vinyl. So clearly it's not just whether it's colored or not, but I just think that there's sometimes, especially when you get a little weird with it, you can hear a difference. And sometimes they're getting closer to picture disc in terms of their outcome than a traditional pressing, where it's like it's meant to look at more than listen to. So so these are records to look at.
On my list would be that way.
These are records to look at, but also records to listen to. And we're going to go through our top three. I'm going to start with one that, speaking of what I just described, on the surface looks like a totally normal record. What in the world makes this one of my best looking records? It looks like a plain black record, does it not? But the thing about Power Salad's Vaudeville is it is a very unique record that was put together by someone who clearly cares a lot about records and wants to meet specific outcomes. And let me explain.
Okay.
There are several things that make this record different from any other record in my collection. Number one, it has no bead on its lip. It is flat record on the way in. A little history on that. That used to be how all records were. And then eventually, in the 1950s at some point, with the creation of automatic record changers, they started adding that little bead on the lip of records so that the automatic record changes record needle would slide into the groove, and so that the records, when stacked upon each other, would be less damaged because the grooves of the records would have that slight offset by the bead. Well, let me ask you, Drac, do you stack your records raw on top of each other these days?
Heck no.
All right.
That gives me hives just thinking about doing that.
When you put a needle on a turntable, are you used to hearing a little popping sound?
Usually, yes. I mean, there's a slight.
That sound is caused by the mechanism of the bead on the front of the record. Now, this person who made this record was like, I need to stop that. So they went and made a flat record, which means, of course, that if your auto tracking is off or something, you might need to, in fact, physically move the record to catch the start of the groove, because it doesn't do it automatically. The second thing that's different is the inside of the record has what's called a run-out trap. Do you know what a run-out trap is? Have you ever had a record get to the end and start scraping up against the label, making awful sounds through your speakers? A trapped groove will prevent that. It's basically after the last track, it just goes in a loop on a regular inner part of the plastic groove, which is silent, so that you don't have any end of the record sound. This person is enough of a vinyl nerd audiophile that they were like, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to remove the sound from the start of the record and the sound from the end of the record. And then the third thing that I would point out, you'll notice that there are no track breaks. Maybe it's hard to see in this light, but this is one long continuous track.
Can sort of see it there, yeah.
There's variances in the vinyl because of the natural way record grooves display, but it's one long track, and the reason for that is this is one of 40 records that was hand pressed using one of a small number of currently existing individual record presses. So basically they crank them out one at a time, like in Europe, using basically a hand individual press. They start the master, they press direct to the record. And there was a group of 40 of those that got made, and I've got number 40 of it that happens to be signed by the band. But all that stuff together, the weird run-out groove, the weird opening, the hand-pressed nature of it makes it clearly one of my coolest records.
Well, yeah. That's crazy.
The music itself is a little bit something that you might hear on, I guess, a Dr. Demento or something like that. A little bit of kind of, it takes a vaudeville approach of being a variety show in terms of style, everything from death metal to country. And the clip I'm going to include is a really fun clip where they do a version of Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Oh, nice. I can't.
Felt appropriate for this episode.
Indeed, yes, very much so. All right, my number 3. I'm going to admit I'm cheating. I'm cheating on this number 3 because this is a Zoetrope album. If you're familiar with what that is, it's the Nightmare Before Christmas soundtrack. It's the Zoetrope version. Let me actually get these out of here so I can show this off. It's gonna look weird just to, like, look at them, but once you actually see it on the turntable, you'll understand. But there's what it does is when it's moving, when it's playing, it will. Kind of like if you remember as a kid, you would draw stick figures in like the corner of like a piece of paper,
a flip
like
book,
a notebook, and then you would flip through, and then it would look like they were animating. That's what this does.
The same basic process of film, like original film strips as well, where you have individual images at 30 frames a second or whatever, and you get a motion picture, otherwise known as a movie, right? So
I tried to show you when I was showing my clip, and I actually have to get the other off my turntable because I forgot to grab it off. I apologize. I couldn't figure out where the other record was, but here's the other record. But you can see, let me try to get close. But you can see So I admit this one's kind of, and this, like you said earlier, this is almost verging onto the picture disc territory.
Well, it doesn't. I've heard that album, and it sounded pretty good to me.
It does, and I was surprised. I have like a colored version of it, and then I have this because I wanted this because I just thought that was amazing, and then it. I don't know if it's just because I have such bad eyesight. It's hard for me to see that zoetrope effect. And I've read a lot of people have that problem. Some people see it, some people don't. I tried to catch it on video. I don't know how well that I did on that, but hopefully you can see it. But then I've watched other like people on YouTube, and I can see it really good on their videos. I don't know what they're doing, but
I can actually maybe explain it. And you know what I just said about film strips, how they would do individual frames of film, 30 frames a second, and that would create a motion picture. The same thing is required. So use your cell phone camera at cell phone, either video set at 30 frames a second, or just the photography mode usually does it if it's set to like UHD. Play with the settings. You need a frame rate of 30 frames a second, and then you're looking through it on like your camera there, and then you'll see the animation go of it. But you can't generally with the naked eye because you don't have that shutter effect going with your own eyeball, right? So
but no, that's just one of the coolest looking records I have, I think.
Boys and girls of every age, wouldn't you like to see something strange? Come with us and you will see. This our town of Halloween. This is Halloween. This is Halloween. Pumpkins scream in the dead of night. This is Halloween. Everybody make a scene. Trick or treat. Tell the neighbors gonna die of fright.
My number 2 is a record that I had to get rid of its original outer jacket for because, again, it was a PVC outer, sent almost like a picture disc, and all that's really left then is the album itself and this, which is clearly classic, by someone named Jimmy Carl Black. And Jimmy Carl Black used to play for the Mothers of Invention back in the day with Frank Zappa, and this is a much later period record that I think he did for Friends and Fans. And the reason I'm including it is you can see it has a very weird edge.
Oh, yeah, it does.
This is an 11-inch record with basically a 10-inch with this weird little outer lip here. And it rather than trimmed off at the end, it's just presumably the squished vinyl without it being trimmed off at the very end. The music itself is really kind of covers of 60s standards and things like that. I think at this point, I don't really know the history of this record other than I saw it and I was like, that is so weird looking. And I'm a big Zappa fan, so I was like, well, heck yeah, I'm buying Jimmy Carl Black's. There's a thing in here saying it's like limited edition to 500 copies or something like that from 1981. Okay. So I assume this thing has some collector's value to it.
I would think so.
I would also just point out that the track I selected for episode 5 here is an old cover of a song that is called Cherry Pie.
Give me some. Give me some. Give me some of your cherry pie.
See, tying it back to the hair metal episode. I love it. Nice. So my number 2, then again, this is going to be, some people are going to say this is just a colored version of a record. Who cares? I just think This is amazing. It's by a band which I'm sure a lot of people have probably never heard of. It's by a band called Entombed, and the album is called Wolverine Blues, which I don't know how they got away with that, actually, without getting sued, but somehow they managed to do it. They're a death metal band, if anybody, I don't know if anybody has ever heard of them. But this is a recent press, and it's on this black and red, kind of almost like tiger type. I just think this is, and when this is like spinning on the turntable, it looks just so cool to see this spinning. But there you go, Entombed.
That is so good. That is so good.
I figured you, of all people, have probably heard of Entombed before. I would assume.
Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
I remember them a little bit, but I can't tell you much about them other than I remember they were sort of a heavier metal band.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep. Yeah, they're very heavy. They have like that death metal growl vocal and very, very heavy sludgy guitars. But yeah, that's just, I just saw that colored pressing and I'm like, okay, that's cool. Plus I remember that album when it came out and I've always liked that album. So
I did the same thing for my number one, because ultimately I have a bunch of color splatter vinyls of various shapes and forms, and I was like, well, it looks really cool, and which one is better than others? And I was like, I don't know. In some ways it led to my initial discussion of, I don't know that I actually care that much about colored vinyl, and for the most part I don't even really look at it, and if I do, it's often like, I guess it's okay. However, this record is probably my favorite of all my color vinyls, and it's this clear with splatter sort of on it. And the reason I really like it is because of the way it spins on the turntable itself, because I think it just looks cool having those little blobs spinning around on the turntable, and the little circles in the ring itself kind of almost have a weird trance-like effect just because of the color gradient on it and that. So if you're looking at a singular point, it just looks really weird. This is the Hohokum soundtrack. Hohokum is a video game, a very kind of casual, puzzly sort of open world game where you play as that little thing there, and you're just sort of wandering around this fantasy universe, really just moving around and listening to chill music, and that's really the game. It's sort of an experimental indie game, and it's got a really cool soundtrack.
And my number one, we talked about it in an earlier episode. I don't even remember why I showed it, but I'm really going to talk about it now. It's Pearl Jam. It's the Dark Matter, but it's the limited edition Record Store Day, ghostly. Like, this is just, hands down, this is the coolest looking vinyl that I own.
Ever since I saw it on your original debut of the show here, I've been like, that's the coolest looking vinyl I've ever seen.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it's got like the center label is even awesome, but see, look at that. That's just, I'm sorry, that's just awesome.
Yeah, that is.
There you go.
Truly amazing looking.
So yeah, that I think hands down. I mean, I have some pretty cool looking like pressings like this, like colored pressings. But I think, hands down, this to me, like when we talked about doing this, I'm like, number one right here. Like I had to think about my 2 and 3. I didn't have to think about this number one. So yeah. And like I said, this is the record store day. This was limited to like, I want to say 1,500 pressings, 2,000. I'll have to look to make sure I'm right on that, but I know it was limited.
From what I can gather, the album was really good too.
It is. It's right up there with one of my favorite Pearl Jam albums. It's probably my second favorite Pearl Jam album easily.
Is it their newest?
It is. Yep.
So their newest is really one of their best.
It is. Yep. And then again, Pearl Jam is like one of those bands that you go back and you listen. Like if you sit down and you listen to the full Pearl Jam catalog back to back, you're going to see the growth and the change in the band. Like this Dark Matter sounds nothing like what 10 sounds like. Like 10 in Versus, pretty much the same. Vitology, they started changing, and then by the time they get to Yield, and then Gigatron, they're starting to grow. You can see them grow as a band.
Yeah.
So yeah. So if you're going into it thinking, oh, I want to hear Pearl Jam at their grungiest, at their their 10, I want to hear 10 Part 2. That's not going to be Dark Matter for you.
The light from my eyes, in the blood from my heart, when all this dark matter.
They're a much more mature, grown band on that, but amazing album, amazing pressing.
Sweet.
Easily my number one.
I realized when putting together this list that the thing I have the most of is something that would purport to be, quote, blood-splattered red. I have fewer than three blood-splattered red vinyl records that are listed as like promo hype stickers on it.
Yep.
Yeah. Of all the colors, that's the one that I've got the same of as it were, other than black.
I have a lot of blood splattered, and then I have a lot of like swirl something, like black and orange swirl or cream swirl or
What's funny too is none of those three, none of the three blood splattered are that great. I don't think they're actually. Why do they keep trying it? It doesn't work.
Mine too. I haven't seen one either that I'm like, okay, that's cool. I'm like, yeah, okay. I mean, it's kind of gimmicky, but I kind of see where you're going. But okay.
Another one I actually almost put on my list was a John Carpenter, which is largely just a black record, but it's got these little streaks of dark blue in it. And so, like, when you just look at it on the webcam, you'll be like, it's mostly black, isn't it? But when you see it on the turntable, it's got, like, this slight refinement to it that just makes it super classy. But ultimately, it just didn't stand out enough. None of the colors, except for the one I picked, really stood out enough to me to make the list.
And I almost included on my list was the version of the Police Synchronicity that I have. I have one of the translucent ones. If you hold it up to the light, you can see completely through it. When you're looking at it just with your eyes, it looks like black. But if you hold it up to the light, it's completely see-through.
It's cool.
I don't know how they did it, but it was like there's a limited number of pressings of those. There's like Synchronicity has like a gabillion different pressings of it. And there was some that were that translucent, and then the others, the only difference between the album is they changed the colors on the album cover. And I'm like, really? But then again, there's some people that collect every one of those.
Yeah.
Not me, but yeah.
Well, okay. So ultimately then, what is your favorite color record?
I think anything red type, because red is my favorite color. And I really like it, like that Entombed. I really like it when they do like a black and a red together somehow. I just think that, let me grab this Entombed out again. I just think black and red look so good together, especially on the vinyl. But I think anything red.
I'm going to go with orange I'm gonna go with orange myself. I like a good orange record. So
I have some orange red records that look pretty cool too. But yeah, I think definitely red. Like you give me a red pressing. If I have my choice between a black and a standard black pressing and a red pressing, probably gonna go with that red one over the black.
Really? I might go for the black. I think I would actually go for the black record. Yeah. I
kind of figured from what you had said earlier, I figured that was going to be the case. See, I would probably go for the red.